Hello and welcome to video 6 in the endocrine system series of lectures for anatomy and physiology. We are on page 6 in our diagram packet. We're actually going to cover diagrams 6 and 7 in this packet. So last two videos we talked about how membrane-bound receptors actually work with G protein and cyclic AMP. Now we're going to look at something called signal amplification. So that's what this whole process is called, signal amplification. And we're going to show how one hormone binding to a receptor can cause a cascade effect. So I drew in a plasma membrane up here. So here we have the hormone attached to a receptor. And based on that, we know that when that hormone binds to a receptor, we end up activating G protein. And in actuality, one receptor can activate several G proteins. So in this example, we have 3 of those. So one hormone, one receptor, 3 activated G proteins. Those G proteins then, once they're activated, the alpha subunit breaks off, and then they can bind to enzymes. In this case, now we have activated adenylate cyclase. And these 3 G proteins activate 10 of the adenylate cyclase. And these numbers are not important. It's just showing that we can have 3 and then we amplify it up, hence the amplification. Those adenylate cyclase then can activate many more cyclic AMPs, and those cyclic AMPs can then activate more protein kinases. So we have one signal amplifying to, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 36. And if this happens with the hormone flooding a bunch of receptors, we get a huge response very quickly with this membrane-bound system. And so we can have a rapid response to something. Now, that ends membrane-bound receptors. So what we're going to look at next is this diagram on page 7. This diagram is the nuclear receptors. We mentioned them before in general, but now we're going to look at a little bit more detail. And unfortunately, the numbers did not copy in this. So this first one is number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So with this, nuclear receptors are a lot slower in their effects than the water-soluble hormones with membrane-bound receptors. And here in step 1, those little things that look like kernels of corn, those are actually the hormones. So the hormones diffuse through the plasma membrane. Remember, these are lipid-based hormones. They can diffuse through the hydrophobic section of the plasma membrane. Then you can see that these hormones, as they diffuse down through, go between the nuclear pores. So this is the nucleus. There's the nuclear membrane, and we have those nuclear pores. So step 2, we can see that the hormones enter the nucleus and bind to nuclear receptors located in the nucleus. That complex now, the hormone receptor complex, binds to DNA in the nucleus. And this is going to cause synthesis of number 4, this is mRNA. So here we have our DNA, here we have our messenger RNA, and we know that there's a whole series of steps that make mRNA, but the binding of the complex to DNA causes mRNA synthesis. So that's the process of transcription that we talked about clear back at the beginning of the year. And then mRNA is going to travel out, and we have the whole process of translation. So mRNA travels into the cytoplasm, binds to a ribosome, and we end up with translation and a new protein made. So, nuclear hormone receptors actually function inside of the nucleus. They ramp up the production of proteins. This takes time. It can take several hours to see any effects of this. So these hormones are ones that maybe work over a long period of time. And a good example of that are the sex hormones. Puberty takes a long time to occur. It happens over a period of years. So it doesn't have to happen right away. So testosterone production or estrogen are good examples of secretions or hormones that activate proteins being made. In this case, it would be sperm or egg cell production, or any of the outward signs of puberty that we would see. That concludes our discussion on how hormones actually work to cause an effect. So our next series of videos are going to look at specific glands, endocrine glands, and how they work and what their target tissues are. So the first one we're going to be looking at is the pituitary gland. It is probably the more complicated because there are so many different hormones that it produces.